Welcome. It's 6 o'clock and I want to start on time because I know that all of you are taking time out of your busy day to come to our 5th Town Hall meeting. I'm Denise Bryan. I'm the Health Officer at District Health Department 2 and 4. And how many people are here for the first time? Any couple? Welcome. The focus is not 101 anymore because we're 2 years into our journey, but we have many links on websites where you can get the basics information on PFAS, PFOA. You know, this town hall meeting is about a progress report and current data. What progress have we made since the last time we met, and where do we want to keep moving towards? Your input is very important to this process. There's a lot of players. I want to thank our panel for coming tonight to give the information that they're in experts their area. And thank you again for coming because we were the genesis of all things PFC, PFAS, PFOA in the state of Michigan. And that was 2 years ago. We pushed forward saying we want data and information to deal with this. And we said we didn't have all the answers. We still don't have all the answers, but we're making progress in the right direction. The important thing is, I'm going to say it, and I've said it for the last two town hall meetings, there's a right side to this issue. Quality, safe drinking water for everyone. So that is the goal. And what do we need to do to get there? So these panel experts will give us some information that will guide us. I think key, and it's just a privilege to report that the governor's office has a representative of the response team that the executive directive has set out. And Carol Isaacs is from the governor's office leading that, and she'll be presenting on that piece. So this has grown in the state of Michigan. It's growing globally as a national issue. And I think also as your health officer, I need to really hold our ground with making sure our needs are met. As more resources are needed to deal with this, I need to make sure we're at the table. And so I have been asked to be an advisor to the governor's task force on this response. So as a local health officer, we will be at the table. And I really appreciate that opportunity because this has got to be a coordinated event. For the advocacy, we are very lucky that our elected officials have been talking the talk in Lansing and in Washington, D.C. Senator Stamas and Representative Ayler are in a long, drawn-out session, doing good work for us, I'm sure, and sent the regrets that they could not make it after all. They want an update of what concerns and direction we're taking from this town hall meeting, and they are committed to staying connected with the issue and with the people of Oscoda, Sable, and wherever else we may find the PFAS, PFOA. There is, from Congressman Kildee, Jake is here, he provided a handout, and I wanted him to come forward because he has some great information on some appropriations from the Department of Defense. So Jake, is he here? Okay, well, if he steps in at some point, I want him to announce some of the appropriations and the good work. I'll move forward to introduce our panel because I'm going to keep this thing moving along tonight. So many of you may remember Sue Menente from the state. She's going to help moderate this evening as well. And we have Carol Isaacs, who's here from the governor's office, and we'll be talking about the MPART. We have Sue Leeming from DEQ, Mike Jury, DEQ, and we have Corey Gretsch as toxicology, and Dr. Eden Wells, our medical director from the state. From local Oscoda Township, we have Ann Richards, And for the U.S. Air Force, we have Matt Mars. And our RAB co-chair, we have Arnie LaRich as well. Jake? We are interested in have you coming forward, and if you could give us an update from Congressman Kildee, we would appreciate that, if you don't mind.
Well, thanks. As I said, I'm Jacob Bennett from Congressman Dan Kildee's office. We have a couple of updates. I know we've talked about some of the meetings. There are a couple of things that, bipartisan things that we're working on with all sides. And the biggest thing right now is it's called the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. And in there we had three things we were able to get through with the help of, like I said, it's a very bipartisan group of people. Now the three things that we were able to get through was the health study. You know, we talked about that before. We were able to get, I believe it was $7 million for specifically a health study for the PFCs. So that part is in the NDAA that came out of conference committee. The House passed the conference committee. They were just waiting on the Senate. We assume after the tax votes would be done in the Senate. But that is on its way to, as soon as the Senate passes it, it'll be going on to the President. So that's already done. The other one was through the NDA, we told the Department of Defense to come up with alternatives to PFC products that they have. So they have to go through and find alternatives to every other uses that they have. Find them, and I believe we gave them about a year to come back to us with a report on that. So that was also in the NDAA. The last one is there's a fund in the Department of Defense called the Environmental Restoration Account. And in there, we were able to get $70 million into that account. That was also in the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. So authorization is a part of the process. Authorization puts a framework of saying this is how big the pot is. After that, appropriation has to actually put the funds into it. So it's going to be a two-level fund. So we get the authorization there, great. Now we have to go to the appropriation side and actually physically put the money in. So those are the three things they were able to get so far. I know a lot of guys have been asking for updates, but we continue to work on this as well. But I can tell you that these meetings are very helpful to me and for the congressman when he talks to the Department of Defense. I take your questions, your concerns, as well to the congressman, and he regularly meets with the Air Force, and I can guarantee you that when we meet with them in the Department of Defense, your concerns are brought up to them. So I have some flyers on the table as well. It also has my phone number on them, so if you have problems or you want more comments, please give me a call. It's to our office, specifically ask for me, Jacob Bennett. I'm the one that comes up here, and I'm the one that deals with all this stuff. So thank you guys, and like I said, I'll be around if you have more questions. Thanks.
Do we have any local elected officials in the audience? If we could have you stand up, I'd like to recognize you. I don't want to miss anyone. Thank you very much for coming. These are all folks that have been advocating and staying really up to date as to what's going on and connecting back with all the partners on next steps. So thank you very much. Now, the rest of you are the all-stars. We want to give you information, so let's continue on with our evening.
Thank you, Denise. Just a couple of items before we get started. I want to let you know that all of the presentations will be given first this evening, and we'll take questions after the presentations are complete. So we'll have a lot of time for the Q&A, so don't worry, we'll answer your questions and listen to your concerns. I do want to note that some of our presenters flew here this evening and will need to catch a flight back. At 8 o'clock, we'll have to pause if we're not done so that those presenters can leave to catch their flight. There will be other agency personnel here who can answer your questions, so we will stay as long as we need to. I'd like to thank J.D. Hawk for coming and setting up all the video equipment, providing our microphones. He's come to every meeting that we've held so far. And I just really appreciate you being here and providing your services for these meetings. So thank you. We will be passing microphones back and forth this evening, so I appreciate your patience while we do that. Shouldn't be too much of a delay. If you need restrooms, they're just out the door this way, so anytime, please help yourself. So let's move to our presentations. Our first presenter is Carol Isaacs with the Michigan PFAS Action Team.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm from the governor's office. I'll introduce myself. I am an attorney. I'm also a nurse for many years before I became an attorney. And I am the director of something called IMPART. On November the 13th, the governor wrote an executive directive for his cabinet, and he established something called IMPART, which is the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. This executive directive to his cabinet really signifies the significance he places on this issue. And I think unique to Michigan, across the country actually, that when a governor places something in his office, it really shows that he is serious about making sure that the management of this issue is good and rapid and appropriate for what the people are experiencing here. I will tell you that IMPART is really pulling together the local responses, the state responses, with our federal partners. So this is a full court press to look at this issue, and I haven't been here very long, but I can say that I was on a phone call with local officials and people here earlier, and thank you so much for your time and for informing us about what's going on in your area as we really attempt to look at the water here in your area. So as far as IMPART, we will look at everything we can possibly look at, and that includes nationally. There is not anything that we won't review to look at this. I know most of you are aware that you're not the only area of the state. We really have 14 areas and 28 sites that we are reviewing. And so there is an awful lot of effort here on behalf of the departments in state government. The 4 departments that are really involved, all departments will help, but the 4 that are key to this are environmental quality in our health department, in our ag and rural development, in our military and veterans affairs. So I also want to recognize another person from the governor's office tonight, and that is his cabinet director. Mike Zimmer is here. So he did come to hear everything that's being stated. I am not going to take a lot of time tonight because I actually know that the most important part of this meeting is what you say and the questions you ask us. So I am here to help in any way I can, and thank you so much for allowing me to come. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you. We appreciate you being here. Our next presenters are Susan Leeming and Mike Jury from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality.
Thank you. My name is Sue Leeming, and I'm a Deputy Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. And I'm just going to say a few words before I turn it over to Mike, who's the technical guy. I just wanted to follow up on what Carol has said and let you all know that the DEQ is proud to be a part of this, and we're very committed to our participation here. This is one of the first PFAS sites, actually it is the first PFAS site in the state, and Bob Delaney and others have been working on this site for a number of years. We're still learning a lot about PFAS, but a lot of that education has come from the experiences that we have here. So the DEQ is committed to this site, participating on this site. We have been coming to all of these meetings, and we will continue to be here at these meetings and provide as much technical support as we can and as needed here. I also want to just mention that we do have a number of sites around the state. As Carol mentioned, we have 14 locations and 28 individual sites within those 14 locations that we have so far identified as having PFAS contamination issues. And we're trying to follow a similar process in all of these sites, which was really initiated here, where the first steps in state government and from the DEQ is to make sure that everyone is having clean and safe drinking water. That's our first priority. And so the first things we do is we go and we test the individual residential wells to ensure that everyone has safe drinking water. And the second step in this process is to do the remedial investigation, to investigate where is the plume, what are the concentrations, where is it moving, what are the sources, and that type of work. And again, we're well along in that process here, and Mike will talk a little bit about that. And then the third step in this process, of course, is remediation. What do we do about it? How do we fix this? How do we ensure that everybody has long-term safe drinking water? So we're just beginning on that part of the process here as well, and we appreciate all of your support and your help as we go forward in this process. This site is much farther along than our other sites because we've been here the longest, and so we are, as I mentioned, we're still learning, and we're learning from you as well. So with that, I'm just going to give the mic to Mike, I'll give the mic to Mike, and he can talk about what we've recently discovered here and what our work has been, and where we're at and where we're going. So with that.
Good evening. I'm Mike Jury. I'm from the Saginaw Bay District Office. I cover this county, and I am, quote-unquote, the boots on the ground. Also in the audience tonight, I have Ben Hinks, who is brand new, been with us for a year, and he will be doing a lot of good work for you around here. First of all, I want to thank all of you that are here. I want to thank the folks in Oscoda Township and Oscoda Township. Thank you so much for your assistance helping us do the work for your local residents. Also, I want to thank the residents who have given us the ability to do the sampling programs that we've done, the borings that we've done, the monitoring we've done, the sampling that we've done. Without your help and your assistance, we wouldn't be anywhere. So thank you. I realize it's been kind of an imposition to have a drill rig sitting in your front yard, not something everybody wants, but thank you for allowing us to do that. So let's move on. So if I could have the first slide, please. Oh, wonderful. So we're talking about Wordsmith Air Force Base, and you're here, you know where it is. We've got it outlined on here. If there's some visitors here tonight that maybe don't know what we're talking about. So next slide, please. Okay, one of the questions we get all the time is, what are you doing about drinking water? What samples have you taken? So the slide we put up tonight gives you a general idea of the areas where we're doing drinking water sampling now and areas where we are not doing drinking water sampling now. It's kind of hard for you to see. So if you're in this area along here, along F41, it's all good. So, so if you're in that area along there, we know you have contaminated water. We know that. So we're not doing any sampling there. You have the ability to get a filter to take care of the problem. So then we go up into this area here along Van Etten Lake, and there you can see that area. Once again, we know that you have water that's contaminated. You have the ability to get a filter. So if you put in a drinking water request, we might not sample your well. Simply, we already know there's an issue there. You have the ability to go to the health department and get a filter. So that goes along for this big area over here. When we get down to this area, these are the new areas that we've been working in, and those are areas where we are looking for wells to sample. We have some requests in. I've asked for those requests to be passed along to us so that we can get our consultant to go out and do that sampling. I can't tell you exactly when, but it will be soon that we will get out there and sample those locations. So we have completed the sampling around Oscoda High School, and that's done. It's hard to see in the audience, but there are green dots here, and this is work that we're doing and continuing to do, drilling down in those areas of southern Oscoda Township. And that's work that we're doing. That's a current sampling area. Next slide, please. These dots here, if it's a green dot, then that's work that's been accomplished. A yellow dot is work that we have left to accomplish. If you'll notice, there is dots to the north. We've attempted to bound the plume to the north, and we think we have accomplished that task to find out where the groundwater contamination goes to the north. You'll see that we've added some other ones along Van Etten Lake to try to get a better idea of what's going on there. The southern area was new to us. We found that there was contamination there during a little bit earlier work we did. We immediately decided to step out, and those are the green dots that are down here. If we find that there are additional problems down in those areas, we will continue to move out with our work and try to bound the plume to the south. The yellow dots are work that we have to accomplish yet, and you'll notice those are on U.S. Forest Service land, and we hope to get that work going later this year. One of the questions we get asked is, are you going to do something on the bottom of the lake again? That is a goal of ours, is to do some more drilling on quote-unquote the bottom of the lake. For those who don't know what I'm referring to, the bottom of the lake, when your lake is dropped about 4 to 5 feet, you have a dam on there, the lake levels are set by law, and those water levels drop, and then you get big sandbars. So the goal for us is to go out and get on that sandbar and be able to drill, quote unquote, into the bottom of the lake. We didn't do a whole lot with that last year. What we did is proof of concept, as I call it. Can you get a drill rig out onto that sand? People told me, oh my gosh, you're going to sink in the sand, you'll lose your drill rig. No, that didn't happen. So we know that we can get a drill rig out onto that sandbar. And so this year, if weather cooperates, Van Etten Lake, if you live on the lake, and many of you do, you know that lake level goes up and down 2-3 foot in a couple days, very easily. It's a very flashy lake. So with that, if we get the right weather conditions, we will get back out there and actually do the real job that we want to get done out on that lake. Next slide, please. With that, we also have done work using not our consultant, but my own crew out of Lansing that does drilling for us. So we've done work down at the high school area, up at the Cold Bath area, including Alexander Road, and also along Log Drive all the way over to Lake Huron. That's work that we have done, has been accomplished using work done by our folks in RRD. Next slide, please. Another question we had was about the pump and treat systems that the Air Force has in place. So one of the questions was, what does that do? What is it doing? So what we've graphically tried to show you is that, and I know it's awful hard to see, but there are blue dots in here right on the edge. These are the pumping wells that the Air Force has in place, and we put the plumes on the map and then put these are stylized areas that we believe, as the models show, where water is being captured by those systems. And I'm going to pass the mic over to our Water Resources Division person that's working on that permit, and let Tarek talk about it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tarek Buckmaster, and I'm in the Water Resource Division permit section. And we have issued 3 permits for this site for the discharges. There is one for the groundwater remediation for the landfill area that was issued in 2011. And then in 2016, we issued 2 permits, one for the FTO2 firefighting training area on the west side of the base. And then we also issued another permit that covers the 3 existing pump and treat systems at the Arrow Street, Benzene, and Mission Street location. Those permits were issued in 2016. The FTO2 site has been active for a couple of years and is effectively treating the water from that location and has a groundwater infiltration discharge. The second permit, covering the 3 pump and treat systems, those are current systems that do not have any treatment on them right now, discharging to the surface waters. The permit for that location includes a December 31st, 2017 compliance date for the installation of treatment. Since the indications are that the treatment will not be in effect at that point, we would be looking for instituting some normal compliance procedures for that permit. I'll pass it back to Mike.
Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So I know that one of the questions that you came tonight is to ask questions about foam. I'm not going to cover that. Department of Human Health Service, DHHS, is going to cover that for us. So please wait till their program and they'll talk to you about foam. And if you have questions, I will be here. I am not going to be on a plane, so I will be here to help answer questions. And Bob Delaney will also be. So Mike and Bob and our consultants will be here to help answer your DEQ questions tonight. Thank you very much. And as I said, we truly do appreciate what you have done for DEQ. We can't do this without you. We can't get the work done that we have to do without your permission to use your property and be able to do the things that we need to do. So once again, thank you. You are a partner in what we do, the DEQ does. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mike and Sue. Our next presenters are Eden Wells and Corey Gretsch from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you, and we do know we are expecting many questions about foam, and we will be turning that over to our chief toxicologist in the field here, who many of you already know, Christina Bush. But just for a second, I am Eden Wells. I'm the chief medical executive in the Department of Health and Human Services, and I wanted to just make a couple comments, but before turning it over to our chief toxicologist and our head field toxicologist here. And that is, I cannot emphasize enough the role the local health department is playing, perhaps not even in sort of being the lead, I think, for the state. And I think it's quite appropriate that she has been asked to advise the governor's staff on this, and in part, because this has been the first site historically that has really probably best characterized the issues of the PFAS chemicals within this environment, a military-based environment. Every site around the state is different. This is the best characterized, but there's still a lot to learn, particularly regarding what areas in the environment may be affecting health. We do know, and I just brought this out just to show you all, there are many handouts in the back that have frequently asked questions, also questions you can ask your doctor about, also some great questions if you have you want to bring some extra handouts home to share with your family doctor, so that it's good advice for them. It's the issue with PFAS is that we don't know as much about this group of chemicals as we do about other toxins that are in the environment, such as lead, or even the dioxin issues that have been dealt with in the last few decades. We're still learning. It's an emerging public health toxicant. So as we learn about this, many of you have been instrumental, as I listen to all the partnership and the volunteer work that you are allowing to have the people come and drill and test the water. The same thing will happen as we are going forward. What our goal here in the health department, and again, with the local health department leading the charge as a model, I will say, for the other local health departments that are being impacted, is to protect first your ability to get the safest drinking water to you right away. That's the first step. Some of that's temporary, you're getting a faucet, filter, and all of that. Some of it will become permanent as they learn where these plumes are and how they may be affecting your homes. Okay? But I would say that as we do algorithms or figuring out who needs to have what type of treatment, this takes the toxicologist to look at the data that the Department of Environmental Quality and other people are drawing or sampling from, and to determine the impact potentially of the health of you and your family and your children in actual specific addresses. Okay? And that takes a little bit of time, but I want you to know that the algorithms established here are similar to all the ones being practiced by the state, DEQ and MDHHS, across the other sites. There's no difference in how we're approaching that, even though every site has sort of different issues. So I just wanted to make those points. I do know you're more interested probably hearing more of the technical issues. If there's any questions about health, I'll be right here and I can answer more. But I think we want to turn it over to Corey Gretsch, who is really leading a very important part of our department, which is the Environmental Health Department.
Thank you, Eden. So actually what I'm going to do is just turn it over to our lead toxicologist, Christina Bush. I think Eden covered that lovely, hit all the high points. We're here to answer your questions. We're partnering with DEQ. But Chris is the one who and she's been working on this for several years. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris, and let you take the floor.
Okay, thanks, Corey. The two items that I'm going to focus on tonight are going to be discussion on the foam and then also our decision process for determining what areas need alternate water. So we're not on this slide, we are on we're on the presentation, that's number 3 from DHHS, a different PowerPoint. That's right, thank you. And you can move to the next slide, please. So the pictures that are showing here as far as the foam update, is it behaving? Okay, thank you. And I think there should be a second picture on there too. I didn't realize that those would come up differently. Nope, sorry about that. I had two pictures of foam on this slide. And these were pictures of the foam when it occurred last summer. And I know that a foam has occurred on the lake since then. As a matter of fact, we just got a notification today about more foam seen on the east side of the lake. So we needed to evaluate what does it mean to have some kind of exposure to this foam. This is something new to us. You know, we're used to talking about water, we're used to talking about contaminants in soil or in the air. Foam is something new. So next slide, please. So in our initial evaluation of the foam, the DEQ had sampled it and analyzed it for the PFAS content in it, for the family of chemicals that was in it. And the first samples showed about 2,200 parts per trillion of PFOA and PFAS in the foam. And PFAS, P-F-O-S, was the predominant PFAS in the foam. And I'm going to say right now, we are used to saying PFC when we're talking about this family of compounds. The geeks out there are going to say PFAS. So I apologize for the confusion that can cause. I will try to spell out the names so that you will feel a little more comfortable with my discussion on them. So about 2,200 parts per trillion of PFOA plus PFAS in the foam, and sure, that sounds high, but then I calculated it as far as what about a child playing in the foam at the beach? That seemed like the most likely exposure scene that could happen. And when I calculated out how much a child might be playing in the foam, putting their hand in their mouth and swallowing some of it, figuring out what the dose that came from that was about half of the dose that is considered acceptable, the dose that they use to develop the drinking water number. So I thought, okay, well that looks okay, but there's a lot that we still don't know. It was a one-time sampling event. We didn't really know if this was an accurate representation of the foam. There could be different concentrations out there. We didn't know how frequently this happened. So on the next slide, I talk about the additional samples of foam that were taken since that initial time this summer. And the reason that they took that, because the person who took that sample, as careful as he knew that he was getting some of the water from the lake into that foam sample. Now it's sitting right on the water, on top of the water, so it's easy to get that water in there. And that's, in this case, that water was kind of contaminating, it was diluting the sample. When they went back, took the next sample, very careful, and actually this was a sample taken by an Air Force consultant, the maximum PFOS, that single PFC, concentration was 165,000 parts per trillion, way different than the 2,200. So then I came back to the evaluation that I did and said, okay, is this a likely scenario? The scenario that I looked at before was getting that foam in your mouth every single day. Up here in Oscoda, is a child going to be sitting at the beach in their swimsuit every single day? I would not be out there today in my swimsuit. So I figured, okay, what about a summer-only exposure? So we're still working on this, but what it's looking like is that if the child got foam in their mouth and swallowed it, it's possible that that could cause an internal increase, but we don't know what that means. When I say an internal increase, I think I've talked before to you about these chemicals are used in so many products that it is not uncommon to find these chemicals in our bodies already. 98% of the human population in the US is going to have some level of these chemicals in their body just because they are so pervasive in the items that we use. So by use and by them being made, they're out there and they're in us. So predicting, step back please. So predicting the amount in the blood is going to be difficult, and then we don't know what that means. This science is just so new here. Okay, now for the next slide, please. So we felt that the appropriate recommendations to make, first, skin contact is not an issue. There's not going to be any kind of health significant amount that could get into your body. Your skin is not a perfect barrier, it's a very good barrier. And also the chemistry of these compounds is such that it's not going to cross the skin barrier very easily, that's for sure. We felt that the most appropriate recommendation was to avoid getting the foam into the mouth and swallowing it. The easiest way to do that is to avoid contact with the foam. So I want to point out, and you have probably seen this because you live in a water area, there are naturally occurring foams that can be seen on water bodies. It's usually where the water is choppy or agitated, and then you get into a little eddy and it slows down, and that's kind of where the foam builds up. So these foams are a little different. We have a lot more to learn about them. I think in the meantime, while we're learning, the idea would be when the foam is there, don't play in it. So, and that's easy to say to an adult. To a child, that's maybe a little more challenging. I want to move on to our decision tree, or our decision matrix, process, algorithm, whatever you want to call it. So I think that bears repeating. I've talked about it before, but I think I'd like to talk about it again just to help you feel a little more familiar with what our process is. And the key to this decision making is understanding the PFAS source, where it's happening, where it came from, what are the concentrations that we're seeing by that source area. In this case, the source area is going to be the Air Force Base property. Do we know how and where the groundwater moves? And at this area, for Wurtsmith Air Force Base, we have a pretty good understanding because there have been previous contaminant issues here. So, and then is there enough data from this area to get a concept or a picture of the site? So in the down gradient areas, next slide please. When I talk about down gradient, think about downstream. So the west shore of Van Etten Lake is down gradient, it's downstream from the Air Force Base. And historic groundwater data shows where the groundwater is going. It's heading to Van Etten Lake or it's heading down toward the river. Sampling has also shown us that the PFAS were on the east side of the lake. So our decision process, the way we've got it lined up, is that if we detect any amount of PFAS in these drinking water well samples, we recommended alternate water. It did not matter about the EPA number of 70. The 70 does matter on the next slide, because on the next slide we're talking about outlying areas. The outlying areas are like the Colbath neighborhood, the area by the school. And those are not, they're not downstream, they're not down gradient from the base. That means that big mass of contamination that's at the base, those high concentrations in the groundwater, that's not moving in their direction. These are kind of contained because it was localized from firefighting in the area. They brought foam out to it to put fires out in the forest by the school, or localized house fires or mulch fires in the Colbath neighborhood. So the groundwatering monitoring wells that Mike was talking about that have been installed in certain areas are really the sentinels to keep track of what's going on in the groundwater. Your drinking water wells should not be the sentinels. The monitoring wells are the test wells that are the first guard against this contamination moving your way. So with this, because the mass from the Air Force Base is not moving in their direction, we expect this to be fairly stable. We look at the detections and we feel confident that we can compare them to the EPA number of 70 to determine if there's going to be a need for alternate water. If it's over 70, yes, there was one house by the school area that was over 70. They have alternate water. Next slide, please. And that's the end of my talk. I want to give it back to Sue.
Thank you, Chris. Our next presenter is Chuck LaShawn from District Health Department number 2.
Thank you, Sue. For those that you have been here for various meetings, you have an understanding of somewhat what the local health departments are involved in this program. But for some of those, there look like 8 or 10 of you that are relatively new or new to this meeting, just want to give you some background on what we do and some of the information we have and some of the things that you can do locally to get more information. Eventually. Oh, okay, that's the last slide. There we go, next slide. Okay. We did outreach and communication, door-to-door communication, went to as many homes as possible. In fact, ended up going to 281. We being the local health department, Department of Health and Human Services, Senator Stamos's office participated, and try to go to as many properties and talk to the people face to face. We feel that was the best way. There are a lot of people who are obviously transient up in this area. It's a big vacation area. A lot of people aren't around. They don't attend these meetings. And so this was a good way, especially during the summer months, to go and try to catch as many people at home and talk to them about the program. We had 5 door-to-door campaigns with the community outreach. The community outreach meeting, these meetings, staff participated, our local staff, in 5 of them. We have a website that I'll give you later on, and a lot of media activity. And then I'm also on the Restoration Advisory Board, one of the members, so we're taking part in that as well. Next slide. Alternate water supplies, these are the latest figures as of November 30th of this year. We have a total of 167 alternate water supplies, meaning the coolers or the RO systems. 12 units are currently pending installation. The breakdown of the units, 122 of the Culligan, 43 water coolers, so you got about a 3-to-1 ratio. 2 of the Aquasana, which we just started using, and 19 municipal hookups. Next slide. This is an expenditure breakdown with our local health department, how the money was spent. $126,000 in supplies, basically the coolers and the RO systems and our filtering systems. Some supplies, very small part in the office. Staff costs, $27,000. That's direct costs and costs associated with benefits. And then also the other associated costs, a small amount of money for supplies and other things in the department. Next slide. This is our website, DHD2. Information is put up there on a regular basis, whether we get it from the state or anywhere else. Any information we get, we put it up there. We also have the links for partner websites. It has all the maps, the dates, filtering system information. Anything you pretty much need to know is on that. And if there isn't something, you can always give us a call and we can find out further information about whatever your question might be. Next action steps that we're looking for, Denise mentioned about being part of the MPART, and that's nice to have local health department on a board like that. Believe me, I've been in public health for 35 years, and a lot of times local public health are not invited to a lot of these types of boards, and this shows a lot of respect for Denise and what she has done here. State regulation, health officers working with the state and legislators. She does that on a regular basis. I mentioned about the Restoration Advisory Board, the RAB board, that I'm on that. Coordinating with MPART to get timely and detailed information on the website. So Denise, once again, will be where everything is taking place, so we'll get timely information on the website as it is presented. Any federal agency support, that's okay, that may come into play in the future, whether it be ATSDR, disease registry, whether it be the EPA or any other federal agency, you can be assured that we will get that on the website on a timely manner, and that'll be available to everybody in the community. And then contact information, you can always get a hold of Denise or myself or anybody in the department that's involved with this for any questions. People come in, I'm usually in the Tawas office, sometimes in West Branch. People do come in periodically and ask us questions about various issues, about their wells, or about the situation, especially those, again, who are not living in the area and are not as well versed into what's going on. They occasionally come into our office and we get a chance to talk to them and update them on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Speaking of websites, I want to mention that we have a website as well at the state level. And you're probably, or you may be familiar with our website, which is www.michigan.gov/wordsmith. And that website is now part of the larger MPART website, which has information about all of the PFAS sites in the state. That website is www.michigan.gov/PFAS, PFAS response. So you can find Wordsmith either at the Wordsmith web link or at the PFAS response web link. So I want you to know that. We're working to place a link on the Wordsmith PFAS website. So if you want to request that your water is sampled, you could go online and submit an electronic request to do that. We'll let District Health Department number 2 know when that's available, so you can also post a link, and if the township would like that link as well, we'll provide it to you. So just an update. I'll repeat those websites a little bit later in case you didn't get a chance to write them down right now. Our next presenters are Ann Richards and Tim Cummings from Oscoda Township.
No problem. I want to make sure I wasn't standing like this. All right. Good evening, everyone. So I'm Tim Cummings. I'm one of your publicly elected officials on the Oscoda Township Board of Trustees. I'm also the Township's board-appointed representative on the RAB committee, which you've heard so much about tonight and in recent months. But first, I'd like to thank you all for attending the afternoon session and tonight's open house. I'm strongly interested in each of you being informed about the various issues surrounding the Wordsmith Air Force Base. I have already noticed there are numerous topics. If you haven't already noticed, there are numerous topics always in play on this topic of the Wordsmith Air Force Base, the closure, the contamination, and such. The last thing I want of each of you as part of our community is to be out of the loop as topics progress or as new topics occur. Short of that, or it would be ideal if you'd be able to attend board meetings, Oscoda Airport Authority meetings, and RAB meetings, but I realize that's a bit of a time commitment, so short of that, you may find our newspaper and at times the internet useful alternatives. The township is aware of the need by the community and the township itself for a place to go to find credible and current information. Thank you for the website we spoke of earlier. That's very helpful to this point. There's been discussion about how a website and other methods would address this need we all have. You'll be hearing about this in months ahead. In case earlier presenters tonight didn't make this point clear, and you'll certainly hear more about this later as well from Mr. Mars, the RAB is for you, the community. RAB meetings are open to the public, and I urge you to attend the next RAB meeting. I hope you find it informative, so you'll attend more of them. As you've heard, the RAB consists of representatives from different government agencies, including Oscoda Township, which is the seat I hold. In addition to government agencies, there are numerous seats on the RAB representing members of the community and members at large of the community. Mr. LaRiche, who will be introduced, I think, a little later here, is the community co-chair, representing these community representatives, in addition to myself representing the township proper. So there's a point here I want to bring up that I think is very important. It's a recent topic I want to talk about regarding the location of the granular activated carbon filtration plant on the Wordsmith Air Force Base. You may have heard of this topic at board meetings or in the newspaper. The location has been a topic since last August when Mr. Stalker received a call from Mr. Rukowski as a consultant for the Air Force informing us of the Air Force's intention to build on the township property. We appreciated that call from Mr. Rukowski because it was the only communication we had from the Air Force about it. However, the location came as a surprise to Mr. Stalker and the Board of Trustees. The location chosen is prime property in the Wurtsmith district. And the township contends that there must be at least one suitable alternative location to build the GAC plant. As you'd expect, the township and the Air Force have been exchanging emails trying to find other suggestions and alternative sites in terms of use. It's hard for me, though, personally, to believe that there isn't a suitable alternative. And it's hard for me to believe, that there isn't a suitable alternative. However, things took a turn at a meeting with the Air Force on November 1st, when Mr. Mars reported that the Air Force awarded the GAC plant building contract to a contractor that month, the same month that we heard from Mr. Rukowski. And later that meeting, Mr. Mars said words to the effect that Oscoda Township's proposal of alternate locations was delaying the building project. So here's what I want to use this opportunity to say, just to the Air Force and to our public here who's here to watch and listen, that we really want this type of behavior to stop, okay? We would like this to be more generous, to be frank. To the community, I say we, the taxpayers, are paying the Air Force to bring an entourage of public relations personnel, consultants, contractors to this event in the RAB. And as a unified community, let's send a message to the Air Force to follow up today's glad handing and smiles with some integrity and a genuine desire to find solutions that work for everyone. The goal here should be to make this some real progress, cleaning up the Air Force's contamination. Let's hear it once and for all. Lastly, the water main projects are an important part of the Oscoda Township's remediation plan. And for that, I turn the microphone over to Ann Richards, the Township's Economic Development Coordinator, to give you that update.
Thank you. I need a third hand, I think. Actually, I'm just going to use this one. Okay, I just wanted to go over what Oscoda Township's water main extension project, where we're at right now. I believe everybody knows that the health department issued a area of alternate water. This area has grown since the first time it was issued in, the phase 1, 2015, 16. Okay, so this area first affected this side of the lake. At that time, we all know Vanette Lake was supposed to be thought to be the buffer. So in that area, phase 1, we've identified phase 1. Phase 1 is identified in blue. That is basically Forest Lane, or Forest Road, Rose Lane, and then Vanette and Dam Road, that entire lane. Later, that area of concern was expanded. That area of concern was expanded to Loud Drive. Basically, it's a little bit at the top of the screen, you can't see it, but Thalen Creek is the north end of Loud Drive. That extends over to Chippewa and goes all the way to US 23 south to the intersection of F41 and US 23. That we've identified internally as phase 2, okay? In those areas where we have the lines is where water main extension is needed. Everybody else in that area is currently serviced by water main and could connect, in theory, today, if they're not already, to water. So I wanted to provide an update in regard to phase 1. Phase 1 of the project was actually, we were awarded a grant with the USDA. It was an EWAG grant in the amount of $500,000, which was basically what the estimate to bring water to this area in blue has been identified. That project, again, is on Rose Lane, and it basically brings a meter pit there Forest Drive, which is a complete private road, as well as Van Etten Dam Road. The first 1,900 feet of Van Etten Dam Road is certified. The remaining part of that road is a private road. So easements are necessary for the entire length of Forest, as well as Van Etten Dam Road. Unfortunately, the easement process has taken us a little longer than expected, so we were unable to go out to bid this year. To construct this year. We are still hopeful to go out to bid this fall for a 2018 construction, and we're optimistic that that will happen. So there are 12 easements that are needed on Forest Road and Rose Lane. 10 of those easements have been secured. Van Etten Dam Road, there's 12 easements needed. 2 of those easements have been secured. So again, we will be going out to bid as soon as those easements have been secured. And we're working closely with the USDA in regard to that grant. For phase 2 of the project, if you could actually flip to the next couple slides. This is a conceptual cost estimate, and I know it's kind of small, but it's a conceptual cost estimate that was done by Spicer Engineering. It basically takes all those highlighted roads that are in red and identifies a cost factor to bring water main to that area. That project has been identified to cost an estimated $4.9 million. So some people think that the township has an extra $4.9 million to do that. We really don't. So what we're trying to do is get funding in order to put that water, bring water to those residents so that they could connect if they want to connect. So we have done, and I think you've heard of this in the paper as well if you watch the township meetings, but we've just recently submitted a application, it's a pre-application actually to the USDA, and is a grant loan program. The maximum amount of grant that can be awarded is 75% of the project, and then the remaining 25% would be loan. Again, that's the maximum grant award. Our initial review of the pre-application does not show that we're probably going to be eligible for the 75% grant. We're looking more like a 65%, but that has not been confirmed officially by the agency. So that being said, 35% is still a lot of money to come up with. It is our hope that we will secure funding to cover those costs, either through state appropriation. Actually, Senator Stamas has already allocated $500,000 for that. But our goal would be or the township's goal would be, is to, once awarded that project, is to go out to bid in 2018 to bring municipal water to those residents in that area. Again, I was asked a question earlier tonight, what about past Thalen Creek? Why aren't you going farther than that? Right now, the township is using the line in the sand, I think to use your terms, Chris Bush, the line in the sand that has been drawn by the DEQ and the health department where they've issued an advisory. So they've issued an advisory to residents in that area that they should seek an alternate source of water. The township's goal is to be able to provide them the opportunity to hook up to municipal water should they so choose to do that. It will not be mandatory. We can't mandate it, and neither can the USDA. It is going to be an option of the homeowner to be able to do that, but at least they'll have that option. So that is what the township is trying to do in order to bring municipal water to the area. Thank you. Thank you, Ann and Tim. That was very informational. I think we all learned a lot from that. I know I did. Our next presenters are Matt Mars from the U.S. Air Force and Arnie LaRiche from the Restoration Advisory Board.
Okay. Yeah, slide presentation. First off, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight on behalf of the Air Force. And you know, the Air Force has been here for close to a century and will continue to be here. And we will continue to keep working to get everything cleaned up. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and lead in. One thing you have to realize with the DIRT program, this is the DIRT program that cleans this up, is it's all taxpayer funds. So when an issue comes up, we have to have the regulation to push to get the resources to address it. So with that being said, we'll go on into the slide presentation. Basically an update since the last public meeting, which I think was back in April. So going down through the objectives, the Air Force approach, which we follow the CERCLA process here at Wordsmith. And you know, we'll go through some of the other items, the private water well survey and sampling activities, what's been accomplished in 2017, as well as following this, Arnie and I will both talk about the status of setting up the RAB again. So next slide, please. And you know, the Air Force PFAS program protects human health, and we're responding to the AFFF from previous releases back when it was used by the fire departments. And what we, with the regulations, until it is promulgated, we look at the HA. And when there's exceedance to the HA, then we put in mitigation measures. And, you know, once again, that goes back to the requirements under CERCLA. Next slide, please. And just talking about the CERCLA process and going down through that and the basic takeaways through the investigative work, which that's part of what was awarded in our recent project, and we're doing supplemental site inspections. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, and speaking of that, with the supplemental site inspections, we're looking at a tiered prioritization. And right now, our team, which is AMEC Wood, if you want to stand up, representing that contractor, has just finished doing the tier 1, or I should say they'll finish this week. They've been out in this weather. But the tier 1, that's an Air Force release linked to contamination found in a receptor drinking water above the HA, which is 70 parts per trillion. Following that, then we will look at the tier 2 sites, then tier 3, and then our other requirements. And that's on the next map coming up. Next slide, please. And you know, the next slide talks about the private water well survey. They sampled the 54 in the 2 public wells, and there was 1 exceedance with that, and they were tied to municipal. And basically the 2 other the public water wells at the trailer parks, and both were below the HA. The next slide, please. And that's just sort of summarizing that. And then also, this year, the contractor, AMAC, was back out sampling the water wells, and at this time, we had no exceedances above the HA on the private drinking water wells. Next slide. And that's showing the area along where the samples were taken. And I apologize for that slide not showing that better. But they were along the area, predominantly along F41, would you say? So, next slide. And now going on to the PA and SI results, you know, there'll be the map showing that 17 areas which were identified base-wide. And following that, then the SI, which is the site inspections, they were conducted. And from that, we're looking at 13 of the 17 areas, and that's where we broke them down to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and the other. And the report that has been finalized, draft final. And then the SSI, the supplemental site inspection, was awarded in August of this year, and AMEC Wood has just, they're completing the field work on the tier 1 sites now. You can go to the next slide, please. And that shows basically along next to the lake, but that's like showing all 17 of the identified sites. You can go to the next one, it'll show the tier 1. Okay, right there, showing the tier 1, right along the lake there. If I hit the pointer, thanks. Right in there, right there, and right there. Those were the tier 1 sites that were looked at right now. Okay, the next slide. And that just breaks down basically the SI area and the rationale, which goes back over, detected a HA down gradient, private drinking well, and the extent of the plume not defined. That's one of the things that we'll talk about in a minute with the GAC treatment plant and the siting of it, why it is very critical where we put that. So, and the other one, which is also we'll look at, is FTO2, and that's the pump and treat system that's up gradient from Clark's Marsh. So, next slide. And, you know, we have to follow the circular process throughout everything that we do, and appreciate the representative and the senator's representative today, because one thing that we have to keep going with the projects is we need the resources, which are always dedicated from Congress. These are fenced funds to be used specifically for cleanup projects. And you know, over a period of time, it's been close to, I would say, nearly $100 million spent at this installation. So the Air Force has always been up front of the other branches of DOD, which I have worked for them as well. The Air Force is always the first one. So they're the cutting edge. And Wordsmith as well as Pease are two of the installations that are right up front having all these things being done, which the FTO2, the pump and treat, that was one that's been put in place, which has been working good. And the next one that we're trying to get put in and be working closely with MDEQ is the one for the GAC treatment facility. And that one, we're looking at tying in all 3 pump and treats. Plus, we want to build it, which will mirror a lot of, like the Pease Air Force Base, the pump and treat, which is called the Ames system. So we want to do it smartly and do a long-term pump and treat system. Because what we see from our tiered process, the tier 1, tier 2, those sites will probably be putting in extraction wells. So this GAC treatment facility, we want to tie those in, plus the existing pump and treats. So this is going to be a larger GAC treatment process facility, but it's one for the long term to those things. So, okay, next slide. I guess with that, we'll move on to the wrap. There's a presentation.
Okay, the lights went up, and I don't know if it was just a reflection from Matt and myself off our heads, or what.
There's a switch behind you, Arnie.
Okay, okay. Anyways, we'll wait and get the slide going here. I'd like to, the RAB process is something that was set up about 15 years ago, about 20 years ago, in '94 here in Wordsmith, and it ran for 10 years, 2004. And then, for reasons I'm not 100% sure of, it stopped. And it included community section that had a voice. Vela and the YMCA were part of that back then. So about 3.5 years ago, I started wondering why we didn't have one here now, because we have a new emerging contaminant and there's still things to be cleaned up. So I started asking questions. The township came on board after I brought it up to a couple of meetings, and they sent a letter to the Air Force, and the Air Force did say, yes, RABs can be beneficial. They had already started one in New Hampshire, Pease Air Force Base, that Matt had mentioned. So it took almost 2 years, but now we have it. Our first meeting was November 1st. We had some public attend it. I hope that more public will attend these meetings. There was a request at the meeting that we don't wait for 3 months to have the next one, that the issues are important enough to have one within 2 months, and mostly 2 months because we have holidays. So we're looking at the middle to end of January for the next one, so stay tuned. I'd like all the RAB members, there are 15 of us on the community side. Tim mentioned the agency side, that he's a representative and the local officials are, and of course all the presenters, their agencies are represented on the agency side. So if all the community RAB members could stand, and I'd like you to recognize them, and if you don't know one of them, then please, this is on the community side, Jeff, so sit down.
Oh, good.
But Jeff is a trustee on the agency side. Okay. So thank you. So Joe Plunky, Joe Maxwell, Bill Gaines, Kathy Worsterbarth, Bob Tasia. Then on the alternate sides, we have primary ones. There's 9 of us that have voting. Then we have alternates. Dan Stock, right here. Jim Davis. Anyone else that I haven't mentioned? I didn't see you walk in. Okay. So, we're going to be having meetings where we need your input. The Air Force has told us that the RAB is only meant to talk about remediation issues. That's their primary focus. Health issues are predominantly the state and federal health, ATSDR, the CDC, and the state and local district. However, we're all doing this for health. Mediation is for health and welfare of the environment. So we can't forget that. So 2 sides have to talk, need to talk. What does the RAB and now the community side of it gain us? What do we benefit from it? Well, one thing is we have a seat at the table now on the community side. We didn't have that before the RAB was reestablished. So we have more communications, we have more understanding of what the agencies are doing, and they're doing a lot of great work, but it's hard for scientific data like this to get out there and be understood. That's our job, and we're learning. A lot of reports, and you've seen the maps and everything. Start reading the reports if you don't want to get a headache. Okay? So that's critical. And also the local agencies benefited by the RAB because now they have more communication opportunities with the agencies than they had before. That has opened up. What are we actually going to be doing? We're going to be reviewing the reports. We're going to be listening to what the agencies are telling each other. We're going to be trying to understand what they're not talking about. And a lot of times, that's where the real issues lie, is what's not being discussed. And we have a seat at the table. We can ask questions. And so far, we've been getting some answers and understanding, better understanding. So that's beneficial for all of us. Questions like the pump and treat systems that Tarek mentioned. 2013, it was found that the groundwater that was taken out by those pump and treats had PFAS in it. 2014, this agency, the Air Force, asked to shut them down. DEQ said, no, you can't shut them down because the contaminations in the groundwater are going to now go off base. So they require they continue pumping and say they made good progress to put control on it. That was in March of 2014. We're not going to have the system for over 4 years after that date. So without the RAB, we didn't ask those questions back then. So that's what the RAB can do. And we want you as the citizens to contact us and let us know what are your questions. and to come to our meetings and help us do that. And I didn't know I was giving this part of it.
Okay, going back through this, basically the RABs, typically, anytime you take dirt funds and implement, the best thing to do is to have a RAB. And the person that ran the RAB for years, Paul Wachowski, back when he was a dad. And I think that ran to, what, 2004? So, okay, basically, RABs, going down through what they do, and, it's an advisory body. It's the main rule thing of it, and there's a great interest and participation. Going on to the next slide. So it started back in March. And give Arnie a lot of credit for everything that he's been doing. So really appreciate that, and being the co-chair. And falling down through in August, we had our first RAB orientation and site tour. Then in September, we had our second training. And the 1st of November, we had our first RAB. And it's been good. And then we'll have the next one tentatively the 17th of January. So that's what we're working on right now, and trying to get the agenda put together, so we'll be working with Arnie on that. So there's some ideas there. So just basically some more general information on the RAB membership. And next slide. But like I said early on, we partner with the community. We've been here close to 100 years. I had a visit with Scott Landry the other day. A lot of history with YMCA, and did not know they had been here over 100 years. So, there's a lot. It's really a nice community. And I have not met that many of you because I'm new to this program. But there are some really nice people and some really great people to work with on the RAB. So look forward to it. And next slide. These are some of the regulatory bodies that are on the RAB. We do not have one from EPA because in the state of Michigan, we deal with MDEQ. Some states you'll have at the RAB both EPA and the state regulators. But the DEQ, the health department, next slide. We have the Forestry Service, OWA, and the township. So next slide. And then basically when we put the RAB together, that is our mission statement. And then also the goals that we look at. So it's nice. I've been multiple RABs, both Army and Air Force, and I've never had a RAB group that's as large and as proactive as this one. So it is very good. So, there's stuff that's brought to the table. Sometimes it's not pleasant for the Air Force, but at the end of the day, it's things that need to be addressed. So, and I'm the first person that gets a kicking, then I take it back and run it up the chain, as always. So, next slide, please. And, going back down through who's on it, the primaries and the alternates. So, and a lot of them may be your neighbors, so anytime reach out to them, and you're more than welcome to come to any of our RAB meetings, and please do. So next slide. Oh. Well, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Arnie. All right, that concludes our presentations. If you'll give us just a moment to do a microphone shuffle, we'll get to our Q&A session. And it is almost 25 after 7, and as I mentioned, some of our panel members will need to leave at 8 o'clock. So I ask if you have any questions specifically for Carol Isaacs, please get those in now. We will have DEQ representation and MDHHS representation. Yeah, so the rest of the agencies will be here. So give us just one moment here. We also have question cards, so if you would rather write down your question and give that to us, we have a couple of staff members coming up with those cards, and we'll collect those cards from you, get your questions in. JD, I need the mic stand, please. And the lavalier. We're gonna shuffle the microphone back and forth. All right. Okay. I ask that you come up with one question at a time, please. We want to be sure we get everyone's questions in. So if you can keep it to one question at a time. 87. Ah, gotcha. By the way, this meeting will be posted, video of this meeting will be posted.
It's on Michigan Community Television's YouTube channel, which is MICTV Oscoda. We have our own YouTube channel. That's where we also broadcast all the township board meetings right now while we are getting our station back up on the air. Should be a few weeks to get that back and going, channels 188 and 190. But right now you can catch all the township meetings live, the second and fourth Mondays, and this meeting, as soon as it's edited, will be put up there. Again, that address is MICTV Oscoda, and it's in YouTube. Search that page.
And I believe you can find them on the township website as well. Is that correct? There's a link. Okay. Yep. All right. Questions? Anyone? Please come up to the microphone.
All right, we started this evening talking about safe drinking water. And one of the things that's become very apparent to me is that we don't have a good definition of safe drinking water. The Air Force knows what their definition is. That's 70 parts per trillion less. The DEQ and the Department of Health, I think, have a far different definition. And I don't really understand how we're ever going to get those back together. And I'd like to hear somebody address what process is going to make that work and make it legal so that the Air Force has to comply with it.
So I will go from a public health standpoint, the numbers. And then if we get into the regulatory question, I may hand it off to you, Sue. So as Chris mentioned, we are using the 70 part per trillion number, just like the Air Force, for determining if we think there is a risk to health. So if you're above 70 part per trillion, then we start to say, you know, there might be some people, if you drink that for a lifetime, you may have an increased risk of some negative health outcomes. Think of it a bit like a speeding limit, okay? If you're doing a 56 and the 55, small amount of risk of getting a ticket. If you're doing 90 in the 55, your risk goes way up. That's how this 70 number was generated. If you're at 70 or below, we're not concerned about risk of additional harm based on the science we have today. And I say that because science changes, right? We learn more. If you're well above that, that's when we start to have concern. And when they looked at that note, when there's a good study down in Ohio where they did find these associations and correlations, the average concentration those people were drinking was 3,500 parts per trillion of PFOA. So just a little context on the numbers. Now, but you heard Chris say, hey, and we're giving out filters in a whole big region where nobody's over 70. Well, why are we doing that? We're doing that because what's found in the groundwater on the base, right? When you look what's in the groundwater on the base, you're finding tens of thousands of parts per trillion of PFAS and PFOA, right? So that's well over anything they saw. If someone was drinking that for a long, long time, that exceeds what we saw in that Ohio study. So out of an abundance of caution, we're saying, you know, nobody can quite tell us how fast and where it's moving. And so while DEQ is able to go do all that good work, and it's you saw the progress they're making, we want to make sure people have filters, and we can end any exposures for now, and going forward. And then when we get all the information, we'll come back around and clarify, you know, where we thought there were concerns or not. Really hoping that we come back and everybody can say, Corey, you were way too conservative. But, you know, we'll get to that point sometime in the future. So, do you want to say anything about the regulatory side of this, or does that answer your question? And did I cover that, sir?
It certainly is more clear than it was before.
Well, that's a step forward. I'll just say that.
My name's Anthony Spaniola. My family has a home on the east shore of Manhattan Lake. And I would like to thank Ms. Isaacs for coming up this evening, and Mr. Zimmer from the governor's office, and the rest of the panel. I spoke with Matt Mars this afternoon, so what I'm about to say I've already said to him, so this is going to be directed to the state folks, particularly the folks from the governor's office. I came to the first meeting, my first meeting here a year ago, and was very encouraged at what I saw at the time. I'm sorry to report that that is not the case anymore. In the course of the last year, I have seen a number of troubling things, the most recent of which is the map I see up here. We have an Air Force base that is bleeding into Manhattan Lake, into the Oscoda River. The most intelligent way to deal with that, it would seem to me, would be to stop the bleeding at the source. There are some plans for a GAC plant, and there's fighting going on about that. My request to the governmental officials here, sit down in a room all together, because I keep hearing, well, we didn't know this and we didn't know that, nobody told us this. Sit down together and work something out, because we all want a GAC plant installed. Unfortunately, even with the installation of that GAC plant, the plumes that are contaminating Manhattan Lake and the rest of the area will not be remediated. And the most troubling thing that I see is that there are absolutely no plans that are even being considered to start that remediation process. That to me is totally unacceptable. And I can't imagine that the folks here in Oscoda, this was news to me. I can't imagine here that my neighbors are happy to hear that. And I would ask that, now that we have the full attention of the governor's office, that they take a look at that and help us out. Thank you. And I would say to you, the Manhattan Lake Association has sent a letter in mid-November to the governor's office requesting action on this, particularly in light of the recent high surface water levels and high foam levels that have shown up on our lake. We would certainly appreciate a response to that. We haven't received one yet to date. One other thing, and I'll end. There's an issue between the Air Force and the state of Michigan, I'm informed, that's pending right now. And that's the question as to whether the Rule 57 surface water limits, the 11 parts per trillion, 12 part per trillion limit, is applicable. The Air Force claims it's only to discharges from a pipe. My understanding is that other folks believe, and as a lawyer it sounds to me like that really is the better argument, that it's any discharge. I'm informed by the Air Force that the Attorney General's office has been reviewing this for several months now. It's incredibly troubling to me that it's taken that long, because if those limits are deemed to apply to just regular discharges, the Air Force will comply with them, I'm told, because it's a rule of general application. That is a way for us to start remediating the plumes at the source at Van Etten Lake. At the Air Force Base. So I have those comments, and one last question and request, and that would be to provide the data that exists. I saw a map up here just at the start of this and it got glossed over. There was a map of the testing results for the foam and the surface water at Manhattan Lake. It wasn't shown. I'd asked that it be posted. And I would ask that information about data, when it is available, that it be made available publicly. There's a perception among myself and others in the public that this information is closely guarded, almost like a classified state secret. It does not give us a great deal of confidence in our government when those types of things are being kept so closely to the vest. And I think that you'll find that the public will become much more engaged when you start releasing that information more freely. Sorry for the long-winded presentation, but thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your comment. I do really appreciate all of those comments, and I have purpose that we will very soon. I took down all of what you said to me, and I will look into each and every one of those things. So, thank you. Sue, do you want to say any more about that?
I can just quickly let you know that you mentioned several points, and so Tarek mentioned that we have permit requirements on for the pump and treat systems, the systems that are pumping the groundwater, and that those systems have, or those permits have required due dates on it. So we are watching that, we are following up on that, and we've been working with the Air Force and letting them know that we're going to be enforcing those permit requirements. In addition, the comment about the water quality standards and the governor's office, or the Attorney General's office helping us out with that. The Attorney General's office is looking into many of the issues that you mentioned, but I will say that we do have criteria, not for the PFOA and PFAS and groundwater yet, although they are in our proposed criteria, which have been pending, and we're working with the rulemaking process to get those criteria through. That is a list of 305 hazardous substances, and the criteria have not been updated for probably 12 years, and so we are working very hard to update the criteria for all 305 hazardous substances based on current science, current best available science. So we are working with that. We also do, though, however, have a criteria for what's called the groundwater surface water interface, which is where the groundwater would vent into a surface water body, and that number, as you pointed out, is 12 parts per trillion. So I guess the response to that is that our group has been working and studying and mapping that out, as well as taking the samples. We do have levels higher than 12 parts per trillion in the water, so we are moving forward with that part of it as well. Oh, yes, data and privacy. We don't intend to hold our data private, and that's not what we mean to do, and I understand that's how it's being perceived. So as Carol mentioned, we will be looking into that. I know there's a website. I know that we put up our information on that website, and I haven't looked at it myself in the last few weeks, but I know that we do post our letters to it. We try to post our data. I know there's a lot of maps up there, a lot of maps. And yeah, so all these presentations will too. But I take to heart your comment very seriously. And we have lots and lots of data here. We've got a number of consultants who've been working on this for quite a few years. So we'll take another look at that and make sure that the data that we do have is posted. And I think one of the tricks is making it well enough organized so that people can get at what they need, because there is so much data available. So thank you for those comments.
Other questions? Please come up.
How you doing? Thank everybody for coming. These meetings are very important for us. Just want to make that, acknowledge that. The question I have is, do all states recognize that 70 parts per trillion level, or does that vary everywhere?
From a standards and criteria perspective, that number does vary depending on the states. The EPA number is a 70 parts per trillion health advisory, lifetime health advisory. And that is not a enforceable criteria in terms of cleanup or in terms of the states. So you'll find that Minnesota and many of the eastern border states have different numbers. Many of the states are adopting the EPA 70 parts per trillion, and the criteria that I mentioned that the state of Michigan is proposing, the rules that we are working on, also adopts that 70 parts per trillion. So it's 70 parts per trillion, either PFOA or PFAS or a combination additive together.
What's the lowest?
The lowest one I know is 12, or is it 14? 14 in New Jersey.
Wow.
And I can't tell you what that's based on, I don't know.
I won't belabor it, but similar concepts that went into the 70 are used to calculate the 14. Both of them put in what we call large margins of safety. So when they start this process, they all look at animal studies typically. That's what the US EPA did. Once they figure out what either will just slightly cause an effect in an animal or not harm an animal, then in the case of the EPA number, they're taking that number, dividing it by 30 or 300. So they're going way down, concentration much, much lower to where you wouldn't find any effects in those animals. New Jersey did the same thing. They use different amount of safety factors. So the difference between 70 and 14 is an extra factor of 5, right? So if the EPA number 30, you could say 35, now you're down to 14. All of it is designed to come up with a number where you just don't expect there to be any harm. So it's all within that range of conservative protection. Does that make sense?
As the health officer, I have this very question as well. I am not an expert, but Carol Isaac is aware there is a national consultant that has been brought in with national experience. I did at the last MALF, which is a forum for every health officer in the state of Michigan, I brought up a state regulation, and I wanted to push and vet the best number for the state of Michigan. And I'm not going to say that 70 is an acceptable level. I am going to update the medical directors that work in the state of Michigan and let them know about the US EPA standard and then what different states have done. The MPART committee, this response team, is key with this very issue and our legislators, because we can't randomly, arbitrarily, capriciously come up with a number. Water everywhere and not a drop to drink, if it's in water. So I do want to push to get the latest scientific and the experts to weigh in on this, and I want a lot of conversation about this because it will give us a foothold and a platform to move forward to guarantee safe, quality drinking water in the state of Michigan. So I am committed as your health officer to that piece, to move that forward.
She mentioned an expert that we have at the state level contracted with, and this is Dr. Savitz. Dr. Savitz is really very, very renowned, and he is with Brown University, and you may find his CV online, and you will see that he has done an incredible amount of research, and it is very specific in this area, having worked with the EPA, having been on science boards. He is one of the advisors that we are using. So feel free to look up Dr. Savitz online and you can see what this expert is like. So we look forward to working with him and with our local public health departments.
It's a great thing that the governor's office has
specifically addressed this particular issue. There's a lot of hard work going on in this community to make it safe. We're a recreational community. Not only is our groundwater contaminated with PFAS, but our rivers are also, and they are the lifeblood of our communities. People come here to the famed, world-famous Oscoda River. Is our riverbed contaminated? Does the governor feel that 11 parts per trillion is an acceptable level of contamination going into the river? Now, there's all kinds of stuff going in the river. And there's all kinds of contaminants that we've been remediating for many, many years. But I would love to see the governor's office have a zero tolerance for any contaminants going into the river. We have permits that have been issued that have not been met with the regulation of how that's been met. What is the consequence of that? I've never heard of DEQ setting forth a penalty for the contamination going into the river, or the groundwater, or the volatile organics that are in the ground, that they're working very hard. You had 90 sites, you've cleaned up 60 plus. I mean, they're spending a lot of money, but we're giving DEQ the authority to oversee. You're our watchdog. But there are no penalties, there are no consequences. What are the consequences for the length of time it takes this branch of the government to respond to a local community who has no money in their coffers? We do everything on a shoestring. So we're looking for you for consequences. Are there any? Yep.
Who's laughing up there? Come on. Whenever you come on up and take the mic.
I'm glad I don't have that mic.
All right, this is a tough one. We do have consequences. So we set permit standards for discharge limits, and we do have consequences when people do not meet their discharge, their obligations. Thank you very much. Their obligations. There's different paths we take. Our preferential path is always to work with, and I'm most familiar with working with industries and discharge permits, NPDES, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, discharge permits. So when a company has a discharge permit, and I'm looking at Tarek here because he's going to keep me honest, and they don't meet their permit obligations, we take steps to correct that. Now, do we fine them $1 million on day one? No, we don't do that. Generally what we do is we work with that company to get them into compliance. Sometimes that means we give them a schedule and it says, okay, by, in 12 months you need to be here. Or in 6 months you need to be here. And then we check with them and we have them, most discharge permits are self-reporting. So we do follow that and we do have compliance. Now, have we ever had consequences? You betcha. We have fined and we have taken many companies to court. And these are primarily industries.
Bring it home. Bring it here. I've got the DEQ says a lot of stuff outside of Oscoda. But we're talking about the poster child of the PFAS issue in Michigan. Now you have other cities and counties that will take the lead of the work that we've done and the learning process that this community has had ongoingly with the largest corporation in the world. Okay? So we're asking the state, the Department of Environmental Quality, to help us save our river, save our drinking water, and the party responsible for the contamination has to have a consequence. And I'm asking, what is the state willing to do to make sure that what is said is gonna be done is done in a timely manner and in the manner in which the permits are requested?
That is a tough one. We are working together with not only local governments here, and that has to do with the siting of that plan, but we're also working with our federal partners, and we are meeting with the Air Force and the Department of Defense on a national and in headquarters. So those are ongoing discussions to help, again, get them into compliance. I can't promise you that we're going to find them tomorrow or that we're going to, but we are working very hard. I just want you to, I just want to assure you, our goals are the same. We are here to protect the environment and to protect public health. And that's what is our goal, and we all share that goal.
And I don't think anybody will dispute you on that.
And so we need to get there, and we need to get those consequences in place so that people actually do what we need them to do. This is a bit of a different animal when we're working with the federal government and the Air Force, but you know, we have sent some letters in the past. They have been, I'll just say, we've been discussing the some of the finer points of the concerns. For example, the venting of contaminated groundwater to the lake versus coming through a pipe discharge. This is the thing that we're working with the Attorney General's office to get some clarification on.
And 11 parts per trillion in my world from an individual is not acceptable. There should be 0. And if it costs a little more, put some carbon filters on it, or to keep it going a little longer, then that's what needs to happen. So that's just my opinion. Okay?
And I appreciate that.
But I'm not seeing consequences. I'm not, the actions being taken, I don't see it. If I killed a deer tomorrow, then I'd have a CO officer if I didn't have a can at it. This guy's killing our river.
And we will continue to work and emphasize your point. I understand. All I can ask is for your patience and stay tuned.
Good. I'm okay with that.
Hi, my name is Russ Williams. I live on Loud Drive. I appreciate all the emphasis on human health. Of course, it has to be that way. I'm a natural resource kind of guy. I'm a forester. Anyway, I'm wondering about the fish. Nobody said anything about eating the fish. And there's wildlife all over. I see every day out there. You know, does this stuff bioaccumulate? And I'm wondering, where's the DNR? Right. Oh, great, I'm sorry. I didn't see your sign, you know. I missed you. So, good. Anybody can answer.
And let me add one of the questions that was written on the card. When are they going to test the fish in Van Etten Lake?
So the fish testing program, we've had in the state, a long-term collaboration between the DNR, the DEQ, and public health. Public health tends to own it because we're the ones saying, you know, the outcome of how much fish you can eat and all that. So, do you want to pull up that slide? So, we do have fish advisories on Van Etten Lake, on the Oscoda River, on Clark's Marsh. All this began coming out of Clark's Marsh, finding very high levels. The one chemical that builds up of this group of chemicals is the PFOS. So the rest of them seem to move through the fish fairly quickly, so it's all based around this PFOS compound. Hop way down. I'll try to keep this short. I don't want to. I've done a fish advisory a long time. It's my favorite topic, so I apologize. I just, want to. Okay, so if you go online, we have the michigan.gov/eatsafefish website, and there's in that booklet, I just clipped this stuff out of it. There's our statewide booklet. You go to northeast Michigan. You come to this county. You'll find our recommendations in here. We have Van Etten Lake. Now, the chemical list, you don't see, I'm going to knock that over. That's not good. You're not going to see PFAS listed here in any of these fish. We did test the mercury, we did test the walleye and the suckers, I believe, and found there is PFAS in them. It just is not the chemical that ends up driving the public health decision. The public health decision in this case is based on mercury, and mercury is found in every fish in Michigan. It just tends to be the one that sets it. So it's in the fish. We did an entire report that involved Van Etten Lake and several lakes around the state. It's higher, it's not, we don't have a solid background number, but it is clearly higher in the Van Etten walleye than you'd find, say, up in the UP or something like that. So we know it's there, we know it's in the fish. In the Oscoda River, we have put on we've tested fish there as well. We went and put on a very, very health protective approach, because if you talk to the DEQ, they will tell you there are multiple points in that river that are emptying into the Oscoda from Clark's Marsh, which are very, very high, in the thousands of parts per billion of PFAS in those fish. And in checking with other states, that's some of the highest we've heard of. And it enters in the Oscoda River. So resident fish that spend all their time in the Oscoda River, we've said, you know what, we've tested them, we find it in them. We found some fish, it was a bluegill, sunfish that was as high as Clark's Marsh swimming around in the Oscoda River. We said, you know what, we need more data. Until we get that more data, we're saying don't eat the fish out of the Oscoda River. Fine to catch them, fine to release them, all of that sort of thing. So we know more, we wouldn't make a regular meal of it. Now, how's the Eat Safe Fish program work? It's about eating the fish regularly. So if you go eat the fish once or twice in a year, that's probably not going to be an issue. But what we're going to tell you is, if you're somebody who likes to eat fish on a regular basis, don't use these as part of your diet. The Oscoda right now, we need a lot more fish. Last time we tested was 2014, 2015. We'd like to see more data. We've made that request to our partner in the Air Force there, wanting to see them help us get more fish out of that river. So that's sort of our status. I'll stop there.
Who authorizes that from the Air Force?
I guess we'll turn that over there, how that works. I don't know.
Matt, who authorizes the allocation to test the fish more frequently for us from the Air Force?
That would have to be at our next phase, once we get through with the SSI, when we go into, at that point in time, once the standards are promulgated, then we would look at in the RIFS stage.
But if this has been an ongoing situation from the organic volatiles and all the circumstances surrounding previous RAB conversations, this has been an ongoing conversation since 2011. We're just trying to get more baseline data so that we can determine, are the numbers from 2011 the same as in 2017? And if we had allocations back then, wouldn't that just seem to be part of the solution to be able to determine whether or not that's still part of the situation?
Well, that's something that we can look at with maybe within the Air Force, the technical division, which some of those people have been here before.
Yeah, I mean,
and so, I will certainly voice that up through to management.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it's not a new conversation, because you have to do not eat. which is
Sure.
Based on a lot of the funding.
Okay.
I want to add just one or two things. The fish from Van Etten Lake were tested in what year? We collected fish in 13, so newer than 2011. There are some Eat Safe Fish brochures at the MDHHS table in the back. If you would like to pick one of those up, you won't have to go online. You can find what the guidelines are. We also do visit all the bait shops in the area, and we drop off brochures a couple of times a year. So if you'd like in the spring, maybe then again in the fall, well, we issue it once a year. So if you are looking for a brochure, looking for the guidelines, you can also visit your local bait shops and pick up a brochure.
It's a suit. So as a community, we are a fishing community, okay? We're looking for answers. The community was looking for answers. I personally would not like to wait all winter long and then have a brochure handed to me in the spring with no other action or recourse to, let's catch a fish, let's test it. I mean, what is the difficulty in getting that done?
So I told you I really like this topic. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Jeff. So here's, if you go on our website, you can see all of our test results that we have. And every little dot here, I'm telling you I'm a geek, I'm just gonna do it. So length of the bluegill, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches, every one's a little bluegill. And we found that one, and clearly it's an sort of an outlier, but we know that in Clark's Marsh you find them all looking like this guy. And then the rest of them were down here. This is in the Asabo. So I want a lot more data because I need to understand, is that bluegill typical or is he really an outlier? When you go, we tested rock bass. Oops, what? Whoop, no, stop. Wait, okay, there we go, yep, stop it, thanks. Rock bass in the Asabo River. Here we got 2 years of data, 2012, 2014. I like this, starts to look like a pattern. And you can sort of see you're looking between somewhere about 5 up to maybe 50 parts per billion, and it's all that PFAS. I got it.
And what does that relate to in a parts per trillion?
Oh, so this, yeah, you take, say 50 and you add it, it's 50,000 parts per trillion, but you don't use the water number on the fish, you use the fish numbers on the fish, which we wrote a document. Dr. Gray at my office has a nice long document, and here's your numbers. These are in parts per million, sorry. If you put them, this is like 9 parts per billion or 9,000 parts per trillion. I'm looking at Chris to help me out here. Then you got 13,000 parts per trillion or 13 parts per billion. We get up to saying don't eat them anything above 300 parts per billion in a fish. And those are very, again, we're the health department, we tend to be very, very conservative in the way we do it. So drinking water, you're talking 3-4 liters a day is the estimate for the EPA thing. That's why it's so frequent. It's about the frequency of consumption. Fish, not so frequent and not so much. Does that help, Jeff? I mean, there's a lot more data. I'd love to go through it with you more. I don't know. Anyway.
How about annual testing of fish in our community?
There you go.
Our community would like to see that happen. We need to speak up and have it put forth. I mean, there's plenty of guys that'll catch fish for you. Okay, you tell us where you want it, we'll go get them.
I love talking, and that is something we'd be open to, getting that fish plan. We feel like we need to work with the Air Force. We put in money, though. The one thing we have done is we've made a request so we do have funds to test fish, and if those funds come through, we will be back up here working with our DEQ, but that is something that's just in process, so there's not a whole lot I can say about that this month. I'll stick around. That's fine. I got my ride in the back there, so I can stay.
Just make one comment. I think we're looking at let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. We're not all trillionaires, and I agree. There's a problem probably with the fish here. Why not have a local issue? Let's have a millage that we can test the fish far more often and far more accurate, and have extremely accurate reporting. If it's that much of a problem, that's what we should do. Or identify part of the millions of dollars being spent. Well, how much does it cost to test fish?
We will continue this conversation. We will take a short break here. Some of our presenters do have to catch a plane back to Lansing this evening. I would just like to thank Carol Isaacs for coming. We really appreciate your presence here and the information you've provided. So if you'll give us just a couple of minutes to get our folks situated who need to leave immediately. As I mentioned, all of the agencies will still be here, so we'll continue to answer your questions. Give us just maybe 4 minutes.